Baruchot Habaot, ladies, and welcome to another edition of our Torah classes. And whether you're logging on to ohelsara.com or to Torah Anytime, or if you're a YouTube subscriber and you follow us every single week, thank you so much for tuning in, for the inspiration that I draw from you, from your devotion to Torah, to the learning of Hashem's words, holy words. Every single week you religiously log on and you listen, and you don't just listen to the shiurim and absorb the influences of the spiritual message behind Hashem's words, but you actually make your comments on the YouTube channel. You send me emails asking questions and making your comments. You log on to the site ohelsara.com, and over there you will as well leave your comments and send emails. Thank you so much for your devotion to our channel, to our site. I really, really do appreciate it. This week's shiur is going to be dedicated Leilui Nishmat, my grandfather and grandmother, Sarah Bat Mimon and Mazal Tov Cohen, Alea Shalom, Zchuta Tagen Alenu. She was a very, very special and holy woman, and Ohel Sarah is actually named after her, Sarah, and her husband, Alav Shalom Amram ben Mochluf. He should have an Aliyat Neshama. He was also an extremely special man, Baal Chesed Adir. He was a tremendous Baal Chesed, someone who did so much for his neighbors, for his family, was a very kind soul. It's customary that before and during the weeks of the summer, we learn Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers. One of the reasons why we study Pirkei Avot during these months is because sometimes Jewish ethics tend to be overlooked during the period of the summer because of the weather and the relaxed atmosphere. So by studying Pirkei Avot, we can face the summer with strength and inspiration, because when ethics, when derech eretz, when common courtesies don't accompany the Torah HaKdosha, then the Torah becomes dry and unfertile. It can, chaz v'shalom, God forbid, become a Torah that creates a chilul Hashem, a desecration of Hashem's name. So today we are going to learn the first Mishnah in Perek Bet, in the second chapter of Pirkei Avot. But first, I'd like to give you some background information about one of the greatest Chachamim, one of the greatest Torah scholars who actually authored this Mishnah. And I want you to know about this great rabbi so that you could appreciate his words. The author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi Alav Shalom, who is referred to throughout the Talmud as Rebbe. Rebbe. Whenever you see the word Rebbe in the Gemara, not that women see it, we don't learn Gemara, but whenever the men see Rebbe, they know it's referring to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Rabbi Yehuda was such a holy man that he was even given the title of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy rabbi. So if the men ever see Rabbeinu HaKadosh in the Talmud, they know that it's referring to him as well, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Looking at him, he was so holy that looking at him was looking directly into the sun. That's how holy he was. This was a Rav, a man who was able to resurrect the dead. And we're here today about to hear the advice of this great and holy man. And obviously, if he was that holy, I can vouch to say that there's no fallacies in his words. But before we begin learning the actual Mishnah, we have to ask ourselves, what's the real story behind the greatness and the holiness of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi? Who was he really? The Gemara informs us that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who lived during the era of the Roman period, was very close friends with the great Roman emperor Antoninus, also known in the modern world as Marcus Aurelius. They studied together in secret. Antoninus actually built a secret underground tunnel that stretched from his palace all the way to Rabbi Yehuda's home, so that no one would know that they were learning together. And there are many stories in the Gemara about the discussions that Rabbi Yehuda had with Antoninus and the closeness that they developed, to the extent that Antoninus made sure that Rabbi Yehuda was financially sustained throughout his lifetime, and that no Roman should ever disturb him. And in that way, Antoninus ensured that Rabbi Yehuda could teach and learn Torah peacefully. What's the real story behind this mysterious connection of these two great leaders in history? How did this connection affect Rabbi Yehuda, and how was it connected to his birth into the world? In order to answer these questions, we're going to have to go back in history, as we always have to do, because the Torah is not unidimensional. We've seen from our former shiurim that when we learn about one episode in history, it's surely connected to an event that preceded it, and it's most likely connected to an event that will follow that in the future. Every story has a story that came before it and one that came after it, and that's waiting to unfold. So our journey takes us back to Sefer Bereshit, specifically to Parashat Toldot, where we find Rivka Imenu, Alea Shalom, pregnant with twins. And the Pesukim state, Vaitrotzetzu habanim bekirba, and the children struggled inside her. Vatomer, and she said, Im ken, if it is so, if the pain is this great, lama ze anochi, why is it like this? Why am I experiencing this? Vatelech lidrosh et Hashem, and she went to inquire of God. Our Chachamim tell us that she actually went to visit the yeshiva of Shem Va'ever to ask what was going to happen to her, what's going on. Vayomer Hashem la, and through Shem's divine inspiration, Hashem spoke to her saying, Shnei goyim bevitnech, you have two nations in your womb. Ushnei leomim mime'ayich yiparedu, and two kingdoms from your insides shall be separated. Uleom mileom ye'ematz, and one kingdom will become mightier than the other. Meaning, one kingdom will rise to supersede the other. Verav ya'avod tza'ir, and the elder shall serve the younger. What does this mean? Rashi HaKadosh Alav HaShalom informs us that whenever Rivka would pass by a yeshiva or some kind of spiritual place, Yaakov, who was inside of her, would struggle to come out and serve Hashem. And whenever she would pass by a place of avodah zarah, of idol worship, Esav couldn't wait to come out and serve idols. Chachamim teach us that Yaakov and Esav were never meant to be powerful simultaneously. When one falls, the other will rise, and vice versa, like a seesaw. These are two completely different nations, two distinctly separate regimes. One nation loves morality and justice, while the other gives himself license to be barbaric and unruly, and such a duality cannot coexist. They must always be in conflict until one will forever dominate the other. Shnei goim bevitnech. 2 nations are in your womb. And Rashi says, actually it means something very profound. Something that we wouldn't even realize that it could actually mean. Elu, he says Rashi, Elu Antoninus veRebbi. This is none other than Antoninus and Rebbe. Rebbe, as we know, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. שלא פסקו מעל שולחנם לא צנון ולא חזרת, from whose tables neither radishes or lettuce were lacking, meaning they didn't lack for anything. לא בימות החמה, they didn't lack not in the days of summer, ולא בימות הגשמים, and not in the rainy days of winter. Neither of them lacked anything on their table, no matter what the season was. Now this is a very cryptic Rashi that we have to try to understand, because why is Rashi bringing Antoninus and Rebbe, who lived during the Roman era, into the national and spiritual conflict of Yaakov and Esav? That's number one. Secondly, why did Rivka merit to have a son like Esav, who couldn't wait to come out just to be able to worship Avodah Zarah, to worship idols? And the Khatam Sofer Alav Shalom reveals a very significant point concerning Yaakov and Esav. He writes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed to Rivka that Yaakov and Esav were actually destined to be partners in their Avodat Hashem, in their service of God. It was meant to be a partnership like the partnership of Yisachar and Zvulun, the sons of Yaakov, where one learns Torah while the other supports him financially. Just like, by the way, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Antoninus' partnership. Antoninus assisted Rabbi Yehuda in learning Torah. Financially he helped him, and he made sure that the Torah was fortified, learned, and taught. And by the way, that's how it's going to be ba'achrit hayamim, in the end of days, when the final tikkun is made. The good that exists in the other nations will flourish, and those nations will assist us in our avodat kodesh, in our service of Hashem. It's already happening. Many of you who are not yet Jewish, many of you who are in the secular world, you tune in every week. And not only do you tune in and you learn God's Torah, but you're loving it. You have an attachment to it. You're feeling connected to it. And more than that, you log on to ohlsarah.com and you donate. And you're fortifying not just the learning of Torah, but the spreading of Torah. You're in the gather of this Antoninus. You should know that you have a huge portion of Torah learning that's being disseminated into the entire world. That's a tremendous merit that you have, like Antoninus had. But let's delve deeper into the root of this powerful friendship that was forged between Antoninus and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. The Midrash informs us of a very interesting story. One time, the Roman emperor decided that no Jewish children were to be circumcised. At that time, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was just born. And his father, the great Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, alav shalom, who was a Talmudic scholar, he was a huge leader of Am Yisrael, said to his wife, he said, you know, God commanded us to circumcise our sons. How could we annul Hashem's command and heed the decree of this cruel emperor? Rabbi Shimon defied the emperor's decree, and he immediately gave his little baby son, little Yehuda, a brit milah, a circumcision. When word got to the Roman commander of that city that there was a Jew out there who circumcised his son, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was summoned before this commander, who asked him, why did you ignore the emperor's decree and circumcise your son?" And Rabbi Shimon answered, "This is what our God commanded us to do." So the Roman commander said, "Look, Rabbi Shimon, I have tremendous respect for you as the leader of the Jewish people. But you must understand that this was the decree of the Caesar. I cannot grant you leniency and just let you go. I'm going to have to take you to the emperor, and whatever he wishes to do with you, he'll do." Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and his wife, together with this little baby, Rabbi Yehuda, followed a cavalry of Romans and journeyed towards Rome. By nightfall, they reached a special section of the palace where Antoninus, who was the son of that Roman Caesar, had also just been born. Rabbi Yehuda's mother noticed that the Roman queen, she was sitting in a room far off to the side of the palace, and all of a sudden the queen sees Rabbi Yehuda's mother forlorn and crying, and she asked her, "What's wrong? Why are you crying? What can I do for you?" And Rabbi Yehuda's mother proceeded to explain the events that led up to her being in the palace, how they performed the Brit Milah against the emperor's decree. And now they've been summoned before the emperor, who's sure to execute all of them, including the baby. When the queen heard this, she felt compassion for this woman and her baby. And she said, "Please, take my son who was recently born and is not circumcised. Let us switch babies temporarily. You'll show my son to the Caesar, and he'll see that the boy is not circumcised, and then perhaps your lives will be spared." Rabbi Yehuda's mother agreed, and they switched babies. So now, little Antoninus was in the arms of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's mother, and little Rabbi Yehuda was in the arms of the Roman queen. Shortly after this, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, his wife, and the little baby stood in front of the Roman emperor together with that commanding officer who had brought them. And the officer approached the emperor and said, "Your Eminency, these people defied your decree and had their son circumcised. I brought them here before you so you could decide what their fate should be." The emperor asked his servants to take the baby and to check the status of the baby. And they saw that there was no brit, there was no circumcision. The emperor was angry. And he said, "I decree that no Jewish baby boy should be circumcised, and you bring me a boy that is not circumcised? Are you making a mockery of me?" He immediately announced that the commanding officer should be executed, and miraculously that the decree against Brit Milah should be abolished. And then he sent Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and his wife back home in peace and unharmed. So now Rabbi Shimon and his wife returned to the Roman queen, and when she saw that their lives were spared, she said, "I see that God made a miracle for you. And he made a miracle for you through me. And he made a miracle for your baby son through my son. Therefore, let it be known that these two babies will be partners forever." And the Midrash continues, in the zechut, in the merit of the milk that Antoninus nursed from Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's mother when he was temporarily placed in her arms, he merited to learn Torah with Rabbi Yehuda and helped him achieve in his Avodat Hashem, in his service of God. And he also merited to become the ruler of Rome and received the inheritance of this world and the world to come. Wow. What a midrash. But what does all of this mean? The holy Baal Megaleh Amukot Alav Shalom provides us with a deeper explanation. He says that based on various midrashim, we have to understand how it is that Hashem devised this plan, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi should be saved by little baby Antoninus. And he informs us that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was actually a Gilgul, a reincarnation of Yaakov Avinu Alav Shalom. He possessed the holy spark of the neshama of the soul of Yaakov. And Antoninus had that noble and good spark of Esav. So something's finally beginning to make sense over here. The Baal Megaleh Amukot further reveals to us, by the way, that when Moshe Rabbeinu Alav Shalom, when he davened to Hashem to be able to enter Eretz Yisrael, he beseeched Hashem saying the following words: Evrana, please God, let me pass. Please let me enter the Holy Land. The holy Baal Megaleh Amukot says these words, they have a hidden meaning. And he explains that apparently Moshe Rabbeinu saw through Ruach HaKodesh, through divine inspiration, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Antoninus would one day meet. So we daven to Hashem that Rabbi Yehuda should find favor in Antoninus' eyes, so that Antoninus would help him achieve all the Torah that he was destined to learn and to teach. That's why Moshe used the words Evrana, please let me pass. These letters are Rashet Avot. They are the acronym for the following words: Antoninus, Esav, B'imei Rabbeinu Hakadosh, Nitzotz Echad. Which means, this is incredible. Which means Antoninus, who really is Esav, and Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, were a Gilgul, were reincarnations of Yaakov and Esav. They were Nitzotz Echad. They belonged to that one spark. And what are twins? What are twins? What are twins? He writes, twins are a tipa achati. Twins are one drop of a male seed, shenichleka leshnayim, that splits into two. Antoninus and Rebbe, he says, came from that original one drop, tipa achat, that split into two, the two that became Yaakov and Esav. Wow. I want to hear comments now. YouTube, olsara.com. Send us emails. Let us know what you think about this so far. The Baal Megaleh Amukot continues saying that this future friendship had already been decreed when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Rivka Imenu, Shnei goim bevitnech, there are two nations inside of you. That was referring to Antoninus and Rabbi Yehuda, that were meant to do a tikkun, a rectification for Yaakov and Esav. That's why the word goim in this pasuk, instead of being spelled Gimel Vav Yud Mem, Shnei goim bevitnech, it's actually spelled with two yuds. Gimel Yud Yud Mem, instead of the Vav. Those two yuds, those two little dots there, they represent that one drop that split into two neshamot, creating two distinct nations. Furthermore, says the Baal Megaleh Amukot, the reason why Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was given the title Nasi, which means the prince, he was the prince of the nation in the sense that he was the leader of Am Yisrael, was because the word Nasi, spelled Nun, Sin, Yud, Aleph also stands for something. It stands for the words Nitzutzo Shel Yaakov Avinu, which means Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the holy spark, the reincarnation of the neshama of Yaakov Avinu. Therefore, Shnei goyim bevitnech, there are two opposing forces, two nations in your womb, Rivka. It will be in the future that Antoninus is going to inherit that positive spark of Esav Harasha, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi will inherit the holy spark of Yaakov. I say this all the time, but I gotta reiterate. Hashem's Torah is beyond vast. It's holy, it's emet. You see how one thing ties into the next. There are no fallacies here. There are no imperfections. Everything is in the Torah is flawless. It's exact. There's reasons for everything that happens. Hashem's Torah is just, I don't know what to tell you guys. It just came out of Shavuot. I mean, and by the way, I want to show you now, just to take a quick break, of the most adorable but holy clip that I took as I was driving back home on Wednesday afternoon, which was one day before the Chag. And right next to my house, there's a cheder, there's a little boys' yeshiva. And you wouldn't believe what I saw. I'm going to show you now. We're going to take like a minute to show you what I saw. Ladies, take a look at this. I think only in Israel. It's, wow, Marabu Ma'asech Hashem. This is Bemet Marabu Ma'asech Hashem. This is a wonder of wonders. And a big Kiddush Hashem, look what they're doing. This is a little boys' school, a cheder. And since tomorrow night is going to be Shavuot, which is the giving of the Torah, they're creating like a mini mock Hachnasat Sefer Torah, as if Hashem is giving the Torah again to the people. And look at them with all their flags of the Torah and their crowns, the crowns on their heads of being the princes, the sons of Hashem, of the Melech. Wow, look at this. And all the Rebbeim guiding them. As if the cars over there, you see the chuppah? This chuppah over here, as if we're once again going under the canopy and betrothing ourselves to Hashem. Wow, such a Kiddush Hashem. So beautiful. Look at this. All the kids trying to get them to get excited for Shavuot and the giving of the Torah. So beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Wow. What a Kiddush Hashem. Did you see that? How incredible is that? I mean, I have never seen that anywhere else in the world. A mini, like Hachnasat Sefer Torah, like kind of like a mock wedding, as if we're welcoming the Torah and we're receiving the Torah again with these little boys and the crowns on their heads, and they hired a guy to play music in the van, and they had a chuppah there, and all the rabbis are getting them into it. Where do you see these things? Be'emet. Which I tell you, there's nothing like the experience of the holiness that you feel and you actually get to see in Eretz HaKodesh. It's mind-boggling. Anyway, going back to our lecture here. In addition to everything that we said so far, we really do need to know why it is that Hashem maneuvered the situation in a way that the Rivka, this righteous woman, would give birth to a Rasha, to an evil son like Esav. So our Chachamim teach us that it's true that Esav was indeed a Rasha. He was certainly evil. But because he was born from two tzaddikim, two righteous people, like Yitzchak Avinu and Rivka, he merited to have the holy spark of Antoninus already embedded within him. Oh, wait. Now that's strange. Because when it comes to Gilgulim, when it comes to reincarnations, in most cases, the original neshama gets reincarnated into a future person and not the reverse, right? But in this case over here, if it hadn't been for the holy spark of Antoninus that Esav merited to have embedded within him, Chachamim tell us Esav would have been a complete, total Rasha. But instead he received the holy spark of Antoninus, who was destined in the future to assist Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who was the Gilgul of Yaakov Avinu. And together, Antoninus and Rabbi Yehuda would fulfill Hashem's original plan that he designed for Yaakov and Esav, which is to be partners in Torah like Yisachar and Zvulun. Not only that, but Chachamim tell us that in the merit of the milk that Rabbi Yehuda's mother nursed Antoninus, he merited to become a convert and he learned Torah. But what's important for us to know is that when Rivka wanted to know, Lama ze anochi? Why is it this way? Why do I have to have a child that will be a Rasha, that's struggling to get out, just to be able to serve idols? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered her, Shnei goyim bevitnech. There are two nations inside of you. The reason you have to bring this child into the world is because in the future, from these twins, the holy neshamot of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi and Antoninus is going to sprout into the world, and they will unite in friendship and love to the extent that Antoninus will convert and learn Torah in the merit of the milk that he's going to suckle when he'll be nursed by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's mother. So don't feel badly, Rivka, that you too have to nurse Esav. Because in the merit of the milk that you provide for him, you know what that's going to do? It's going to preserve the holy spark of Antoninus that's embedded within him. And even if the milk you provide Esav is not going to be able to purify his evil tendencies, at least it's going to safeguard the holy spark of Antoninus that's embedded within him. Even though Shnei le'omim mima'ayich yiparedu, even though these two twins, these two nations are going to go their separate ways and they're going to have a lot of conflict, in the end, during the time of Antoninus's rulership, Rav Avot Tza'ir, the older one will serve the younger one. Antoninus, the Gilgul of Esav, the eldest, will serve Rabbi Yehuda, the Gilgul of Yaakov, your youngest. Wow. Wow. The nursing of both mothers, Rivka and Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's mother, was the key to spiritual preservation. The Midrash states, just like it was necessary for Esav to be nursed by Rivka in order to preserve that holy spark of Antoninus that was destined to be born in the future, so too it was imperative that Antoninus at some point be nursed from Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's mother. Why? Because our rabbis tell us that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's mother was a Gilgul, was a reincarnation of Rivka Imenu. Oh, wow. And that point was very necessary. Why? Because just like Rivka nursed Esav in order to purify that holy spark embedded inside of him, she had to come back as Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's mother in order to nurse Antoninus and ensure that his holy spark remains intact. We're learning incredible things. I hope you realize that. I'm sure you do. Comment, comment, comment. We gotta know what's it. And one more point before we move on to the actual Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi authored, which we haven't even learned. Can you imagine? By the way, this is the way we really should be learning. Whenever you learn the history of the author of a Gemara, a Midrash, a Mishnah, it brings his words to life. You get to appreciate him on a whole new, different level. So one more point before we move on. The Ari Kadosh Alav Shalom teaches us that Esav's head contained holy sparks of some of our greatest rabbis. When his head was later on severed from his body when he was killed, and it rolled, if you remember, it rolled into the Ma'arat HaMachpelah where the ancestors were buried. The Ari Kadosh says that was due to the merit of the great holiness that was actually contained in his head. There's a lot of kedusha in his head. That's why only his head merited to be buried with the Avot, with the forefathers, in the Ma'arat HaMachpelah. But, says the Ari, from this kedusha, from this holiness in his head, all the sparks of the great rabbis, many of Am Yisrael's great sages emerged in the future, most of whom were Gerim, converts, like Shmaya and Avtalion, like Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes, wow, like Rabbi Akiva, Alav Shalom, wow, just to name a few. And in which part of the head were these neshamot specifically located? Says the Ari, they were situated in his mouth. He says, just as it states in Sefer Bereshit concerning Esav. What does the pasuk tell us about Esav? Esav was an ish tzayid befiv, a man who knew how to hunt with his mouth. He knew how to use his mouth. He used his chokhmah, his wisdom, in order to deceive with his mouth. But the point is that these future holy neshamot that came out from Esav's mouth, they merited to be born in the merit of the milk that Rivka nursed Esav, which he drank with his mouth. According to the Ari Kadosh, that's what Hashem meant when he told Rivka, Shnei goyim bevitnech, there are two nations in your womb. You should know, Rivka, that these two nations inside you are one day going to be Antoninus, the emperor of Rome, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the great leader of Am Yisrael. And just like Antoninus is meant to convert and learn Torah in the zechut, in the merit of the pure milk that he will nurse from Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's mother, so too Rivka, you should know that from your milk, Esav will also merit to have holy sparks hidden in his mouth, the same mouth that he will drink that milk from. And these holy sparks will be revealed when the right time comes. These holy sparks will be the Rashei Yisrael, the heads of the Jewish nation. And you should know, Rivka, that in the merit of the great love that Antoninus will have for Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Yehuda will be able to write the Mishnayot and much of the Torah shebe'al peh, much of the teachings of the oral law. And in this way, the Torah will be accessible and remembered. And he won't have to be disturbed by the Roman Empire that will rule in those days. So you needn't worry, Rivka. The tikkun of your twins will be made and greatness will blossom from them in the future. Many great sages will emerge that will light up the world with Torah. Wow. Who knew? Can you imagine? This is unbelievable. Look at how deep vast and precise our Torah is. And we only touched upon a small aspect of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's background. You imagine? So many things that we learn. So many things that we learn from this. By the way, we also learn that we can never judge anybody because we never know what holy spark they carry that will enable our future generations to promote, to produce, and to preserve Torah. And now we could actually proceed with the Mishnah authored by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was able to peacefully engage in Torah learning and wrote these Mishnayot because of his beloved partner, Antoninos. All right, Rabbi Omer, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, "Eizohi derech yeshara sheyavor lo ha'adam." What is the proper path in life that one should choose? Interesting. There's actually a path. Unfortunately, some people don't even understand Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's question. What do you mean, what's the path? I get up, I eat breakfast, I go to work, I eat lunch, I come home, I eat dinner, and then I lead my way onto the path to go to sleep. Why, there's another path? And Rabbi Yehuda says, yes, there's a path in life where you're trying to get from point A to point B. Point A is Olam Hazeh, this material world. And point B is Olam Haba, the world to come, the spiritual realm. Rabbi Yehuda tells us how to get from point A to point B. And he writes, Kol shehi tiferet le'oseha, whatever is harmonious for the one who does it. V'tiferet lo min ha'adam, and also harmonious for mankind. That means that your path should be one that brings credit and glory to yourself, and the path should be one that will be glorified by others. It means that the path you choose should find favor in your eyes and in the eyes of other people. If a person has a tendency to be extreme, in his own eyes it might be favorable, but others might perceive him as strange and unaccommodating. So Rabbi Yehuda tells us that in general, extremism in life is not a derech. It's not a way, because it will most likely not find favor in other people's eyes. So you have to make sure that the path you choose is one that everybody gets along with, without having to compromise the halakha, the laws of the Torah. So the path that we choose has to be one where those around us are comfortable and accepting of it. And even more, that it creates a kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of God's name. But if it creates the opposite effect, chaz v'shalom, then the path is flawed and it requires correction. And what this means is, if we want to narrow it down even more, is the following. While it's true that the relationship between man and Hashem, ben Adam lamakom, has to be as perfect as we could get it to be, but ben Adam lechavero, between man and his fellow man, that has to be a large part of your equation in the service of Hashem. Interestingly, the Gemara informs us that one of the questions that we're going to be asked after 120 years when we arrive to the Beit Din Shel Ma'ala, as we stand before the heavenly tribunal, besides all the basic questions that we're going to be asked, one of those questions is going to be, Hemlachta et chaverecha benachat ruach? Did you crown your friend with pleasantness? Did you acquiesce to your friend's will? And when you did comply, did you do it amiably? Did you get along with your friend amid your religious obligations to Hashem? This is a tremendous lesson for us to learn, to walk away with, and apply in our life. Because when Bilam, the famous prophet of the Gentiles, was praising the virtues of Am Yisrael, and he did it against his will, he said, Tamot nafshi mot yesharim. May my soul die the death of the yesharim, of the upright. Chachamim ask, who did Bilam want to die like? Who are these upright individuals that he was referring to? And our rabbis tell us he wanted to die like the forefathers Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They were the yesharim, the upright. But what does yashar mean? And how do you acquire that reputation for yourself to be a yashar? And our Rabbanim explained that a yashar is somebody who's able to get along with all kinds of different types of people. Avraham was a yashar. He got along with everybody and was able to sit and converse with every person under the heaven, regardless of his background or religious affiliation. He was able to communicate with each person on his level, despite the fact that his personal beliefs were so unique and singular to that time period. So Bilam realizes that ultimately that's the goal, and he wished to die like Avraham. The only problem with that was that he asked to die like Avraham. And in order to die like Avraham, you have to live like Avraham. It's easier to die with Avraham's name than to live with his virtues. Bilam wanted the easy way out. He wanted everyone to what? To attend his funeral, to praise his greatness as that of Avraham's, like Avraham Avinu. But he wasn't interested in living Avraham's life. Although we see from here that this is what the goal is, to be a yashar. The Gemara of Ta'anit discusses Achrit HaYamim, the end of days, and we're told that when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a tremendous celebration. We spoke about that quite a number of times. But guess what? Not everybody is going to be invited to this festive occasion. Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak Alav Shalom says that there's going to be such an immense, pleasurable light at this celebration. And unfortunately, not everyone will have the opportunity to benefit from that light. Not everyone is going to participate in this great celebration. Says Rabbi Nachman, if you're a tzaddik, if you're a righteous person, you're going to bask in the glory of that light. But if you're a yashar, if you're upright, oh man, that's even greater. Does that mean that there's a higher level than the tzaddik, than being righteous? It seems that there is. It could very well be that in addition to the mitzvot, the tzaddik must also be a yashar. Which means that although a person's performance of mitzvot is on the level of tzidkut, of righteousness, if he manages to also be a yashar, to be upright and to get along with every type of person out there in the world, he brought tremendous pleasure to Hashem's creations, and people actually enjoyed being around him no matter how religious he was. Oh wow, that's an accomplishment. These are the kinds of people who are going to be invited to this massive celebration when Mashiach comes. And Rashi HaKadosh asks, you know why these people are going to be invited? Why them? He says, Yesharim adifhem letzadikim. Those who are upright are preferred over those who are merely righteous, but missing that key ingredient. To be a yashar is a great level, a greater level than to be a tzaddik. He says, just as it states in Sefer Tehillim, Or zarua latzadik, uleishlev simcha. Which means a light is sown and will shine for the righteous, for the tzaddikim. Uleishlev, but for the Upright of heart? Oh, simcha. Oh, there's going to be a tremendous joy. For those who were yesharim, upright between them and their fellow man, ben adam lechavero, while simultaneously perfecting their avodat Hashem, those people are not only going to experience the light, they'll also merit to feel a genuine happiness. That's the goal that Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that we should try to attain. Be a yashar. When the Rambam, alav shalom, Maimonides, advises us to pick a path that's a middle-of-the-road path. Middle of the road, by the way, doesn't mean that one day we do mitzvot and one day we don't, like balancing the week. Sunday I'll do the mitzvot, Monday I won't, Tuesday I will, Wednesday I won't. This is not alternate side parking over here. Middle of the road refers to our character traits. We must look for the happy medium when we're happy. We're happy and the people around us are content as well. We should try to find a middle road, that middle path that we feel joy and those around us are comfortable with our presence as well. Right? Even though the Rambam, by the way, also cites a few examples of areas in life where you have to take an extreme approach, in general, he takes the approach of Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, the greatness of the Gedolim is that they could disguise their greatness in order for people to be able to sit with them and still feel comfortable in their presence. Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that the attitude of, maybe I'm going to do whatever I want, it's my avodat Hashem. You know, I have my views, I have my chumot, I have my stringencies. I don't care what people say, I don't care how they feel. This is my derech, this is my way, let them deal with it. Rabbi Yehuda says that's not a derech, that's not a proper path. That's called extremism. We do have to consider the way that others are going to perceive us when we are serving Hashem. And I must emphasize the fact that I'm not referring here to people who are so anti-religion that they're going to beat you down. No. I'm referring to the average religious person who himself is striving and growing. It's that person that we have to consider. And that's what Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is teaching us. Eizohi derech yeshara. What is the path of uprightness? Notice, by the way, that Rabbi Yehuda uses the word yeshara from the Lashon, from the language of yashar, meaning our observance and path should be pleasant to us and also to those around us. That's number one. But then he states, be as careful with a minor mitzvah as you are with a major one. Because you don't know the rewards of the mitzvot. So be very careful, he says, with the lightweight mitzvot, just as you're careful with the heavy-duty ones. Why? Because you don't know the reward of each mitzvah. You don't know the weight that they carry. And since you don't know the true value of a mitzvah, you shouldn't take any mitzvah lightly, even if in your eyes the mitzvah seems insignificant compared to other mitzvot that appear more important. That's the reason HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not place a value on the mitzvot. Because if he did, what would we do? Let's face it, come on, admit it. We would all run to do what? To score points with the biggest mitzvot, to get the most points in Shamayim from the heavyweight mitzvot, and we would probably ignore the minor mitzvot, and eventually what would happen is we'd be abandoning half the Torah. So we cannot take for granted the small items in life because they have great meaning. For example, if you ask a layman what this stender, what I use to put my papers on is called a stender, what it's made out of, he's going to tell you, oh, this thing's made out of a piece of wood that rests on wooden feet. But if you'd ask a scientist, what is this stender made out of? You know what he's going to say? He's going to start to tell you the atomic structure of the stender. He's going to tell you about the protons and the neutrons, about the electrons and how large these particles or small they are. They're obviously too small for the naked eye to see, but there are millions of them. All matter is made up of minute particles that come together to create a larger item in the creation. So we must remember that when we're building our Avodat Hashem, our service of God, every religious matter is made up of small, tiny parts. We cannot build if we're missing the small components. In addition, the Zohar Kadosh tells us that we have 248 mitzvot aseh, 248 positive commandments that correspond to the 248 limbs of the body. Every time we perform a mitzvah, we are actually giving that part of the body its energy, its strength, and even its health. As a matter of fact, there was a man who once visited the Ari HaKadosh complaining that his shoulder was hurting him. And when he asked the Ari, what should I do about it? The Ari says to him, are you careful with the mitzvah of Mayim Achonim before you recite the Birkat HaMazon, before you recite the grace after meals? And the halacha says, as we know, that Birkat HaMazon, right before you bench, you have to wet the tips of your fingers, which is called Mayim Achonim. In one of our former shiurim, I think it was 2-3 years ago, I explained that mitzvah. So the man replied, of course I'm careful with Mayim Achonim, I wash my hands. And then the Ari says, yeah, but after you wash your hands and you do the netilah, do you talk, do you speak, or do you bench right away? Do you recite the Birkat HaMazon? And the man said, yes. I do speak, as a matter of fact, between, I wash, but then, I can have a schmooze with my friends, whoever's sitting there. So the Ari says, that's the problem. If you wouldn't speak between the netilah, between the washing of the hands and Birkat HaMazon, you'd remedy your problem. Interestingly, the Gemara tells us that we have to recite the Birkat HaMazon techef. Techef means immediately after we do the Mayim Achonim. Says the Ari to this man, the word techef, spelled taf, chaf, pei, which means immediately, are the same letters as the word katef, which means shoulder. You're not careful with your techef. You don't immediately recite Birkat HaMazon after you do Mayim Achonim, but rather you talk. So you're experiencing a problem with your katef, with your shoulder. What we learn from this is that by fulfilling the mitzvot properly, we're providing sustenance, life, and creating a remedy to certain parts of the body. And we don't know which part of the body is being healed as a result of the mitzvah that we're doing. That's one of the secrets of the power of a mitzvah, by the way. I mean, if I asked you, what's more important to you? Your heart, your lungs, or your liver? What would you answer? You'd say, what do you mean? They're all important, and I'm not willing to sacrifice not even one limb from my body. That's how we have to regard the mitzvot. When I'm discussing a particular mitzvah, and a talmidah of mine is going to ask me, Rabanit, ze be'emet kol kach hashuv? Is it really so important, the one mitzvah versus another? You know what I answer her? Is your thumb important to you? Of course it is. Of course it is. That's the finger you text with. It's very important to you. And if you tell me, it's not so important. Oh, it's not so important? Okay, so can I chop it off? I mean, you protect even your thumb if need be. That's how important every mitzvah is. That's how important it is. Moving on to the last part of Rabbi Yehuda's Mishnah, he says, Histakel b'shlosha dvarim ve'en ata ba lidei avera. Consider 3 things and you will not come into the grip of sin. First of all, da ma lemala mimach. You should know what is above you. Ayin ro'ah. There's a watchful eye. Ve'ozen shoma'at. And an attentive ear. V'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavim. And all your deeds are recorded in a heavenly ledger. When a Jew understands that there's somebody above him, there's a God up there, he begins to act, hopefully, with tremendous kavod, with great reverence, and even yir'ah, with fear of heaven. This is one of the reasons, by the way, that men are obligated to cover their heads with a kippah, with a yarmulke. It's so that they'll always know and remember that there's somebody above them, above their heads. And hopefully it's going to prevent them from sinning. Chachamim tell us that actually the word yarmulke actually comes from the words Yareh Malka, which means fear of the king above. For the women, their head covering is obvious. Kisui rosh. The more stringent you are with your head covering, the more Yirat Shamayim you're going to develop. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Da ma lemala mimach. Know what is above you. Ayin ro'ah. There's a watchful eye. There's a spiritual video camera up there recording everything that you do, everything that you say. You are the star of your own life. There is a movie being produced up there about you, and the star of the movie is you. When you look at it that way, you want to make sure that everything is in order before you start shooting that film. Oh, and by the way, says Rabbi Yehuda, Ozen Shomat. You know, this movie of your life is not just visual. It's an audio-visual presentation with a script. And knowing that information is meant to put you on some form of path towards righteous behavior. So, ladies, the advice that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi provides is precious and it's valuable, and it enables us to reach great heights while rising in our Avodat Hashem. And Be'ezrat Hashem, if we heed the advice, we're only going to see bracha, blessing, and yeshuot and salvations in our life. And we'll create great merits, not only for ourselves, but for all Am Yisrael. Amen Ken. Yehi Ratzon.